Thank you, everybody. It's great to be back here again. I really enjoy this group. I enjoy the people here. I know quite a lot of them for many years. I'm Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic from the South Dixie group. And I'm in my 42nd year of sobriety, or whatever the heck this is I've been doing. I'm doing something. And at least I haven't had a drink for a while, since January 25th, 1981. And it's great to be here. So I'm going to talk a little about some things, and we'll see where this goes. I never plan what I'm going to say. I never do that. I used to many years ago when I was actually good at doing this stuff. I used to, because I was scared of what people thought about me and stuff like that. So I would come with all the books. I'd have a stack of books. They'd all be marked. I'd have bookmarks. I'd turn them and everything. These were powerful meetings. Oh my God. But in any event, so I don't do that anymore. But I've been doing these steps for a long, long time. And what happens, and this is just my life, my experience. You know, my sponsor used to say, when a man with experience meets a man with money, the man with experience will walk away with the money, and the man with the money will walk away with an experience. So it's like that farmer's commercial. I know a lot because I've seen a lot. So I've experienced a lot. I've had repeated humiliations followed by the crushing of my self-sufficiency over the last 42 years. So I've changed my attitude on a bunch of things. And there's nothing like experiencing life and the vagaries of life and the problems that you have in life, and trying to work these steps at the same time and go on the meetings at the same time as they're firing live ammunition at you. You know, it's nothing like doing that to crystallize the entire thing and help you maybe even get to the point where you're rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence and experiencing much of heaven. So I'm just going to throw out a few things. I was going to do the meeting. Now, presumably, I know a lot of you think it have been the step meeting since this is the fourth week. This is supposed to be on step 4. We'll get around to that, I suppose. We'll see how that works out. My sponsor used to say, I complained to him about a speaker in an AA meeting, and he'd say, he says, Russ, you must have thought you joined Well People's Anonymous. And these people are lucky they show up fully clothed and in their right mind. And I guarantee you, I will touch upon the 4th step and the 6th and the 3rd and the 15th. They're all sort of mushed into a milkshake. You'll get out of this whatever you're supposed to get out of this. And if you're not supposed to get anything out of this, you won't get anything out of it. And I'll get a lot out of this, you know. I can't wait to hear what I have to say. I had, let me tell you something. I'm 73 years old. I've raised 4 kids sober. I got 8 grandkids, married a long time. Well, I got sober. I got married when I was 3 months sober, so the sponsor said, don't make any major moves. I didn't think it was a big deal. I was probably mistaken, but so I'm going to share a bunch of stuff. I don't really plan the meetings, but I was thinking about the meeting, and this morning I had this epiphany on this great talk I was going to give on a particular enlightenment that I got after my 7 o'clock meeting in the morning, and then I forgot. Because I'm like senile. I forgot, and I'll write it down. But I want to tell you something. If I had done that meeting, it would have been phenomenal. And then around 1 o'clock today, I had another epiphany about another. I can't even tell you what it was because I can't remember, but it was unbelievable. You know. And then what I decided is I said, the Lord's going to give you whatever you're supposed to give, whatever you're supposed to. It's not going to be what you think or whatever it is. It's, you just ask God for help. I always pray before the meeting, to let Him, I prayed, please don't let me show up. Why don't you show up and take over? Then I don't have to worry about it. So this is going to be, anybody like riddles? Anybody ever do jigsaw puzzles? My meetings are like jigsaw puzzles. I'm going to throw a whole bunch of shit on the table. Whole bunch of pieces on the table. You're going to have to put the pieces together. This is going to be like, what's that movie? Pulp Fiction. You ever see Pulp Fiction? It starts in the middle, then it flashes backwards and forwards and sideways. And somehow when the whole thing's done, it's a good movie. You sort of put it together, but it's like cut and it's going all over the place. That's my meetings, Pulp Fiction. But I promise you there's going to be a connection. That's the whole point of staying sober and working these steps. Over a period of time, you get to connect the dots. You see where the 3rd step has to do with the 2nd step, has to do with the 1st step, has to do with the 6th step, has to do with the 11th step, how it comes down to the fourth step, how they all sort of fit together. And you realize when you're done with all the steps, you realize it has nothing to do with the steps anyway. Steps are but tools. It's all about the house you build and the foundation you build it on. It's all about that. But I'm gonna skip all that, and I'm just gonna tell you some stories, because our stories, I suppose, general way what we used to be like and what it's like now. And the stories may seem like they're disparate. I mean that they're separated and they have nothing to do with really what I'm talking about. But hopefully you'll see some sort of connection. That's going to be up to you. You see, I'm not going to give this thing to you on a silver platter. I'm just going to I'm going to throw some crap out, and you're going to have to put the jigsaw puzzle together. I already know how they're connected. I'm not going to tell you, okay? And I'm just going to tell you some stories, and then towards the end of this, maybe we'll talk about something to do with the fourth step, and maybe you'll put something together, and maybe you won't, and who knows? That'll be up to you. That's your deal. That's between you and God, and that's the deal. So I want to tell you a story about a guy named Leo. Somebody asked me to tell this. I know I told Al Kennedy. You guys remember the Al Kennedy story? Mm-hmm. And I know some people weren't here, so you won't know, but that's okay. All these things are on tape. They're all recorded. You can catch up on it. I've always wanted Al Kennedy's sobriety. The kind of sobriety when I first met him 3 months, when I was 3 months. So the kind of sobriety where you could be joyous and love life and be helping people and dying of cancer at the same time. At the same time. Can you imagine that? At the same, dying of cancer, 6 months to live, doing a meeting and loving on people and not complaining. Yeah. Where do I get that shit? The not drinking thing was good, but how do I get that crap? That's the sobriety. That's the vision. Vision for you. My vision of this whole thing was the drinking, which is pretty much what we do here, the Not Drinking Club, for years and years. And most people think that's what this is all about. But when I saw Al Kennedy, when I saw a guy who was 6 months had 6 months to live, at a meeting trying to help other people, and nobody knew he had 6 months to live because he didn't talk about it. He didn't say, well, it's good to be here. I only have 6 months to live. Right? I would have tried to get a little juice from that, but he didn't do that. He just was loving on people and helping people. I didn't learn until afterwards that he was dying of cancer and he had only 6 months. You couldn't tell by his face. He had joy. He had gone into that other group in AA. The group that separated out the men from the boys in group 6. He had been rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence. He was experiencing much of heaven, and he knew peace. And that's because he recognized what the great fact was, to make God the centerpiece of his life. And so he wasn't worried about what you thought about him, or even whether he was dying or not. He was just focusing on the Lord and on God. And like Bill Wilson was when he said, the Lord's been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease I got to keep talking about it to other people. But how do you get there? How do you get to Al Kennedy type of stuff when you're so worried about, when your mind is going a million miles per hour, you got this whole committee of 10,000 voices and they're all you talking bad shit about yourself and other people? And how do you get to that point where you can't deal with all the vagaries and all the crap that's going on in this world and going on with you and everything, and that kind of thing. So I want to talk about a guy named Lee. I'm going to throw out some real fast stories that are true stories about sobriety. They're not necessarily about drinking, they're about sobriety, because these are all stories, most of them are after I came to AA, because that's what we're dealing with right now. You're dealing with living sober. You're not dealing with the drinking problem anymore. By the way, if you didn't have a drink today, you don't have a drinking problem anymore. Understand that? You don't have a drinking problem. So stop thinking you have a drinking problem if you're not drinking, okay? You've got a living problem. You've got a problem with alcoholism. The drinking is a symptom. Get that? Symptom of the disease. You know where I get that from? That's from most of the stuff I get, if not all the stuff I get from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you disagree with me, you're not disagreeing with me, disagreeing with our basic text. The drinking is but a symptom of our disease. Gossiping behind somebody's back and characters assassinating them, that's a symptom of the disease. Getting up every morning saying, if I only had this or that, is a symptom of our disease. Lusting after women, men, money, things, it's a symptom of our disease. Hating God and being resentful about God or the Catholic Church or wherever the hell it happened because you were bounced on your head when you were a kid or your father shot. So being mad at anybody, including the church or any organization, is a symptom of alcoholism. If you got that going on, you're not sober emotionally. You don't have emotional. These are all anything that disturbs your peace is a symptom of alcoholism. That's the spiritual axiom. We don't question it. If you're disturbed about anything, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with you. And the thing that's wrong with you is going to be alcoholism, because that's what we talk about in here, and that's the problem we have. That's the dis-ease. And that's how it works. So, it's really simple. I follow the minors. I follow the people that have, in a sense, sort of conquered this dis-ease. Just because you're not drinking doesn't tell me you're sober. There's a lot of people in here that are 15 years, 11 years sober, not drinking. They're going to drink again. I know that, because most people don't make it after 20 or 25 years. There's a huge gap between 20 years and 40 years. And I'm not going to go into that, but that's the bottom line. So I try to stick with the people that seem to be level-headed and, got the right deal going on. So I'm going to just tell you a couple of stories. So when I was 10 years sober, because I was doing a lot, I was doing all the steps and everything, but I wasn't happy with my sobriety. There may come a point in your life where you're proficient at doing the steps, you're doing everything. I was in the group banquet chairman for 2 years. I was on relay for 8 years. I was doing everything. I was sponsoring everything inside. I was doing step series. But there may come a point in your life where you're involved in a lot of activity, and you're doing the steps, and you're getting medallions, and you're involved in so much activity in AA, and so many meetings, that it'll keep you sober. You're like treading water. You're sober. You're like hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. I'm sober one more day. You know what I mean? And you barely recognize that this world is driving you frickin' insane. You barely recognize that you have to go to meetings because your sobriety is so tender. You're really not solid. You know what I mean? You just have to get involved in a lot of activity in AA, because the truth is you're not that well. But when you're 10 years sober or 15 years sober and you're not well, most of the time, as they say in the book, we're delusional. We don't realize the first step of getting out of jail is knowing you're in jail in the first place. All of us come in here and we recognize we're in the alcohol jail. We don't recognize that we're in the not worrying about what other people think about us jail. We don't realize we're in the pride jail or the envy jail or the coveting jail or the self-pity jail. We don't look at all those jails because to us they just feel like the way we normally think. We think that's the way everybody thinks. It's normal to us to feel the way we feel. And so what happens if you're sober for many years, or even just 2 or 3 years, and they're handing you a medallion and they're patting you on the back and everything, you start thinking, even though you're working all this stuff, this is where you start thinking without even knowing, and you don't even know you're thinking this. You're thinking that you're sober, and subconsciously you're thinking you're sober because you're doing it. You understand? You're doing it. The big book talks about God all the time. I'm not going to go through, I could do it by heart almost, most of the things they say. I'm not going to talk about how they say make God the centerpiece of your life. Your real reliance has to be on God. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. You're on a new basis of trust and belief in God. We never apologize for God unless we let him demonstrate. I can't tell you all the things that have to do with making God the centerpiece of your life. But for most people in AA, God is not the centerpiece of their life. He's like an add-on. He's like a rabbit's foot. He's like something that's there. You say the Lord's Prayer, you say the deal, and really it's about the activity. It's going to meetings, it's doing the steps, it's doing that. And as a matter of fact, for many people in AA, if somebody talks like I do and talks about God, in their brain they're saying, I didn't come here to hear that shit. So the bottom line, in many people's brain who are sober 5 or 10 years, they don't want to hear about God, which is the only thing this thing is about, by the way. The only thing that this deal is about. And maybe you just have to get to be about 73 years old like me, or 6. Maybe you have to get to a certain age where you realize you're not going to be around for a long period of time. Maybe when I was 20 years old, or 30 years old, or 40 years old, maybe even 50, I thought I was going to be around forever. I never was going to die. And maybe you just have to get to that point in time where you've been around long enough and been beaten up enough to know that if you're lucky, maybe it's a matter of 10 years. You're a short timer where you start thinking about other things besides pussy. You know what I mean? Maybe you just have to get to the point where you get to the point where all of a sudden all this other stuff that you used to run after, trying to make yourself be a man or people look up to you or something like that becomes unimportant, and you start growing the hell up. You know, maybe it takes a long time. Maybe some people never grow up. I don't know. So let me tell you about Leo, okay? So when I was about 10 years sober, I had gotten to this point where I hit to the invisible ceiling. You know, I was doing everything, I was sober, but I wasn't happy. And somehow, some way, I realized that I wasn't happy. Now, it's tough when you have a lot of pride and and you have ego and you have false pride. You don't like walk when you're doing this. It's like I'm doing the steps tonight. I don't walk in a room like this doing the steps and say, "Look, I have a problem. I'm not feeling well." I don't talk about that stuff, you know, in AA because I'm the guy who's doing the steps. You know what I mean? So it's not like you talk about it. You like stuff it. You say it's not that bad, or you're doing okay, or you're sober. You tell yourself you're okay, but you know deep down inside there's something wrong. There's something missing. It's like Bill Dotson in Alcoholics Anonymous #3 says he was sober, but he says I knew there was something more, something I hadn't got, some sort of release of happiness. These other guys had it. I didn't know what the secret was. And then Bill Wilson says in front of him and his wife, "The Lord has been so wonderful to me, cure me of this terrible disease. I got to keep talking about it and telling other people." And he says, "I got it. I got the secret. I got it." He called it the golden text. Bill was very grateful to God for his sobriety, and he gave all credit to God for everything. He was like into the God thing, as was Dr. Bob when they asked him, "What's first things first?" He said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All things will be added unto you." Or when Dr. Bob told Clarence, the brewmaster, the first question right off the bat, he said, "Do you believe in God, young fellow?" He says, "What does that have to do with it?" And Dr. Bob said, "Everything. Everything. You know, everything." So here we got two guys who are the founders that say God is everything, and we got this wonderful organization of Alcoholics Anonymous, so loving, that hates it when anybody talks about God. Hates it. You know what I mean? They can't stand it. They want to attack the guy, crucify him, you know. Who does he think he is, you know? You can't talk about that, you know. You can talk about, hey, you can stand up and say you're an atheist. Nobody will say anything to you. You can stand up and say you're an agnostic. You can say things that's totally against the program. Program says, from your code of morals, better philosophy of life, and we've been sober a long time ago, but lack of power is our dilemma. That means, of course, we're going to talk about God. Here's where alcoholics get pissed off. This sort of thinking must be abandoned. Some guy stands up and says, "I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, and I don't think you have to believe in God." Nobody go up to him and say, "Look, you're going to have to leave this deal because we got new people here, and you're killing new people. Because our program is a God program, and you want to be an atheist all you want, but don't be spreading that shit around here." You understand what I'm saying? Because our book says it has to be abandoned. We don't say that to him. We say to the guy who's talking about God, "Don't be talking about God. You're killing people." That's what we do it here. And the reason we do it here, by the way, you know the reason we do it here? Because alcoholics are fucking crazy. Because we're sick. Because we end up somehow running away from the only thing that's actually necessary. Now, 1935 to 1945, they didn't do that crap. Or 1950, they were into that stuff. They'd make you kneel before you got into a meeting. They were really into the God thing. But with all the treatment centers and everything like that, I'm not putting them down. It's a different story. But there may be some people in the United States that are sober that didn't quite get the message or ultimately carry a different message. I might be one of them. I just want you to know there's at least one guy in Miami, and I'm probably not the only guy. There's one guy in Miami that isn't going along with groupthink. Okay, so Leo. So when I realized that I wasn't doing, I talked to him, I said, "I'm not happy," blah, blah, blah. He says, "Have you ever gone to a Bible study?" And of course, the first thing I said, no, I don't do that and everything. I'm thinking in my mind, if I go to a Bible study, my family's going to kill me. And then I say, yeah, and I think that's against AA. I don't think the Bible is approved or something, or I don't think we're supposed to do that. And he said, and then somehow this thought came to me. I think it was inspirational thinking. And the thought was this. He said, Russ, if the only reason you're not doing something that's suggested to you, and you're not doing well, and you're doing the same thing over and over again, if the only reason you're not doing it is because you're scared, you're in fear, maybe that's not a good reason. So I went to my first Bible study. It was a men's Bible study. You understand what I'm saying? There were 50, 60 guys that were 20, 30 years older than me. They had been studying the Bible, which was the basic text they used. Look, I'm just going to tell you, you can call it an opinion. I've been studying the Bible now for 30 years. It's all in the big book. They got it all from the big book. If you don't know anything about the Bible, you wouldn't realize it. You think the big book was something they just dreamed up. If you ever got into the Bible, you would see the Bible all over the big book. That's the terrible secret we have in AA, that if you're reading the big book, you're really reading the Bible. If you're reading about forgiveness and about surrender, and you're about surrendering yourself and turning stuff over and making amends for wrong, and not looking at the speck in your brother's eyes, but looking at the beam in yours. And if you're looking at all the stuff, it's all straight from the Bible. They even come out and say it sometimes. You got to be the Good Samaritan, which is from Luke. They talk about the Good Samaritan. It's all there. You know what I mean? I don't want to burst your bubbles, but you're entitled to your own opinion. You're just not entitled to your own facts. That's what they were reading. The books they found absolutely essential were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the Book of James. It's all in there. And by the way, I didn't say that's in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. That's the books they were reading before they wrote the big book in 1939. So it's all. So Leo. So what happened is he said just to go to Bible study. I sat next to the guy who became my third sponsor, John Glenn. He had 55 years recovery. He was a Baptist minister, and I was with him for many. You try to sit next to a Baptist minister who's got 55 years, who's been studying the basic material and everything like that. Let me tell you something. You're going to wind up like me. I can tell you that. You go out to dinner with him over at Denny's. You sit down. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm eating." He says, "We can't eat." He says, "We got to give thanks first." And the place is crowded. He bows his head, and you bow your head, and he starts going through this long Baptist prayer, thanking Jesus for everything. And I'm looking around. Not that I give a shit what other people think about me, but I'm looking around. What do people think? And they're watching us. Some of them are not paying attention. Some of them are watching us. They're saying, "I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that." That's Al Kennedy sobriety. That's Al Kennedy stuff. Not worrying about other people, just worrying about your relationship with the Lord, worrying about your relationship with God. That's a different type of deal. That's a different type of sobriety. So I mean, he told me, he said, "There's no secret what God can do, what He's done for others, He can do for you." So Leo in 3 minutes. So that's the deal. So I'm driving around in my car, and in my car I got the big book, I got the 12 and 12, I got Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, and I got the Holy Bible, all on the dashboard. It's like a mess, you know what I mean? And I'm going to 3 meetings a day before Zoom. I'm going to a 7 a.m. meeting before I go to work. I'm going to a 12 o'clock noon meeting and going out to lunch with AA guys. And then I'm going to a 5:30 meeting on the way home. And then sometimes in my spots, I'm going to an 8:30 meeting. Or if I'm doing this, so I could easily go to 4 meetings a day. No problem. I'm doing that, married, raising 4 kids. You know what I'm talking about? I'm doing that stuff, And I'm like into it, and I'm loving it, and doing all that stuff. And I'm going to church now, and I'm going to Bible study now. And that's before Zoom, okay? And I'm not thinking anything about it because this is just my life. This is my life. And so the bottom line is, so I'm driving around. I drive up to this dry cleaners, which is right next to my house. You can see my house from the dry cleaners. You can see my roof. And I drive up, and there's this young kid. And his name, and he's a young kid, and I can't explain it. I drive up to give him my stuff, and he comes up, and he's wearing his pants. I can't even explain it. To this day, I don't know how it happened. His belt, his pants, are by his knees. Does anybody know what I'm talking about here? I don't see it that often now, but I'm telling you, his pants are like 4 inches above his knees. And he's like 16 years old or something like that. And he says to me, he sees the books, and I said, "Hey," he says, "Hey man, I got one of those." Do you see what I'm doing with my hands? He doesn't point. He says, "I got one of those. One of those." And I go, "One of what?" He says, "One of those." And he says, "You mean the Bible?" He says, "Yeah, I got one of those." I said, "You ever read it?" And, I believe that if you have the power of God in you, and he says, demonstrate to other people what is God in you. I believe that if anybody leaves your presence, they're going to be changed. You ought to not only be an example to alcoholics, but you should be some sort of light to everybody. And they should just notice something about you. Or, who was that guy? Who is that masked man? And he says, "I got you." I said, "You mean the Bible?" Yeah. I said, "You ever read it?" He says, "Well, I read it. I don't understand." I said, "What's your name?" He says, Leo. I said, "Hey, Leo." I said, "Hey, Leo, listen. You see that house over there, that room?" He says, "Yeah, that's my house." My name's Russell. Listen, every Thursday morning at 7:30, I go to a men's Bible study. And if you're at my house, on Thursday morning, if you're at my house on Thursday morning, you can go to the Bible study with me. He says, really? He says, absolutely. And he says, hey, thank you very much. And I drop my clothes and I leave. And I forget all about Leo. I forget all about him. The next morning, I wake up the next morning. And I get up around 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and walk out my door. And guess who's standing by my car? Leo. Leo's standing by my car. And I stand there with a Bible in his hand. And I say to him, I said, hey, buddy, how you doing? I remember Leo. I said, how you doing? He says, hey, doing fine. You're doing great. I said, you ready to go to the Bible study? He said, yeah. I said, get in the car. We drive over to the Bible study. It's all these guys. I'm the youngest guy there, and I'm like 45 years old. You know what I mean? And all the guys are like 65, 70, 80, 90 years old. They've been doing this stuff for 40 years. He walks in there, he's like 16 years old, 17 years old. He's like, it's like fresh blood, you know what I mean? They can't believe this kid is there. So it goes around the room, and this is hardcore, serious Bible study, which is basically, they're talking about everything we talk about in the big book. The only difference between a Bible study and anything you do in AA is, the bottom line is all they want to talk about is God. There's nobody rolling their eyes saying, well, if they talk about God, but all they want to talk about is God, which is probably why the big book encourages church membership. If you want to grow up and leave the spiritual kindergarten, probably why? Because they're not embarrassed. They're not ashamed. They never apologize. You ever see that thing in the big book? We never apologize for our faith. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. You've got to ask yourself a question. Do you want to go through life with courage? Or do you want to go through life worrying about what you're going to say because some guy who's sitting next to you in an AA meeting who doesn't even pay your visa bill might not like you? You got to worry about how you want to live your life. Do you want to live your life in the bondage of thinking about yourself based upon what other people think about you, or do you want to cut that shit off? You know what I mean? And not decide, because all alcoholics, unless and until an alcoholic accepts his alcoholism and all its consequences, and every alcoholic has one clear consequence. They walk around with a hole thinking they're unworthy. That's why they're braggarts. That's why they got to buy stuff. That's why they got to show stuff. That's why they need to, because they're unworthy, no matter what they say about themselves. They're always looking for approval. And the one thing they can't stand is that you might not like them, or you might reject them, or God forbid they can't join the group. And that's their entire life. And you want to know something? They're delusional. They don't even realize they have a problem. In other words, they'll tell you, I don't give a crap what other people think about me. They'll yell it. I don't give a crap what they think about me. And the louder they yell it, the more you realize that they are totally addicted to pleasing other people. That's why they're all codependents too. I don't even use the word codependents. I use the word dependent. So Leo shows up. We drive to the meeting. We go through the whole meeting. He doesn't say anything. At the end of the Bible study, he raises his hand and says, "Guys, yeah, sure can." He says, "I think Jesus was an alien." Well, they're just like AA. It's just like AA say, hey, yeah, he's an alien. Keep coming back. You know what I mean? That's what they say. Keep coming back. They don't care. Because they're loving on him. They're just glad he's there. So we're driving back, to my house, and he says, so I said, what? He says, yeah. He says, okay. I said, what do you need? He says, I do okay. He says, oh, they loved you, kid. They loved you. Great. The alien thing was a good touch. And but in any event, so we're driving back, and he says to me, can you drop me off at my house instead of? I said, sure, I'll drop you off. And he said, how do you? He said, well, go back to your house. I'll show you how to get there. You go back to my house. He says, so make a left there at the light. I make a left. He says, go down there, just make a right. You make a right. Then make a left, and he's directing me, and we're driving. Make a right, make a left, make a left, make a right. And we finally come to a set of townhouses. And while we're talking, it's like 7-10 minutes, we're talking. I'm telling a little bit about him. He says, young kid. He's got a single mother. He's got a little 3-year-old sister, half sister. the mother had from another guy. She's raising him and another guy. He has no father. Has never had a father. He's just a 16-year-old kid, confused, has no idea what's going on in his life, just trying to figure out whatever 16-year-olds try to figure out with that Martian brain they got, trying to figure out how to live your life and be alive on the planet, with no guidance at all. And so I get into the house. He says, "That's my house," and he's like about 4 miles away, So I say to him, I said, "How'd you get over to my house?" And he says, "I walked." I said, "You walked?" He says, "Yeah, he got up at 3:30 in the morning. 3:30 in the morning, and he walked to my house, and he got there actually a half an hour early because he didn't want to miss me. He didn't want to miss the meeting, the Bible study." And I have guys coming up to me and they say, "So what do I need to do in order to do this thing?" I like telling the Leo story. I go to meetings in Palm Beach or wherever it is. I go to Broward County or here. They say things, "Well, will you sponsor me?" Or, "I want to hear you." I said, "Sure." I drove an hour to get. You just drive on Saturday mornings. We have a meeting here. Come on down there. I says, "Where is it?" I said, "Southwest 187th and blah blah." He says, "Oh," he said, "that's pretty far." I said, "Yeah, I know." I said, I just drove it up here. I'm going to be driving. I know it's far, isn't it?" He says, "Yeah, it's far." What does it take? What does it take? If you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it. I'll tell you one thing I could never do with anybody. I can't put the desire in them. No. I can't instill the desire. I can't instill the thirst you need to get closer to. I can't do that deal. But most people just want to get laid, or just want money, or just want a new car or a different job or a house, or want to belong somewhere. I mean, I can't instill that crap in people when most people are still thumb-sucking crybabies, and will never really get sober or stay sober. Even if they get sober, it won't last. They're going to drink anyway. Because this world is tough and much tougher than you will ever be, and shit will happen to you. It will happen. The vagaries will happen. And it used to be that a lot of stuff would happen to me because I would cause it to happen. It was a consequence. When the IRS seized all my accounts and everything, and all of a sudden I'm floating the money, I'm doing okay, and then one day I go into my bank and they say, "You have no money," because the IRS came in and took it all out. And I had 5 years sobriety, and I had 4 kids, and now all of a sudden I have no money and everything. And I went to my tax attorney, and I said, "Why'd they take my money?" And he says, No. He says, "They took their money." I said, "Well, that's a funny way of looking at it." You know what I mean? Interesting way of looking at it. But it gave me a new perspective on things, And I didn't drink though, but it was, that was a consequence of my actions. And that was a wallop to the stomach. And life will do that to you sometimes. It'll just wallop you. And when they were foreclosing on my house, 5 years later, because everything that happened, the mortgage thing or whatever, is 10 years later, and I had to battle that thing, you know what I mean? Because of the economy and what happened, you know what I mean? And I had to deal with that, and I dealt with that, and that all worked out. And I had to many times I had to get on my knees and say, "God help me," because God will prove Himself to you. And that all worked out incredibly better and everything. And it didn't work out because of anything I did. I just kept on praying about it. And then one day, they told me I had cancer. They said I had skin cancer. And by that time, I had like 20 years, and I'd been going to Bible study for 10 years, and it was like a little bit of a pinch. I felt a pinch. You know what I mean? And then about 5 years later, they told me I had prostate cancer. And I didn't even feel it. I said, "Just tell me about it and talk to me about it." And it didn't even register on the radar. And since then, there's going to be things that happen to you that come out of the blue that you didn't cause, and there's a part of you, a small part of you somewhere, who's going to say, "Why has this happened to me? Why has this always happened to me?" Or you're going to drink from that cup of self-pity. You're going to get depressed. You're going to get angry. You're going to have a problem for weeks on end. And you may not even drink. You're just going to be suffering from alcoholism. And maybe you will drink ultimately. Maybe you'll drink 6 months after that. You know what I mean? And how you react to the stuff, because life is not going to stop. People are going to die. You're going to get in car accidents. You're going to get fired. I mean, the shit is not going to stop happening. Life is relentless. It's going to come at you. So I'm driving in the car with my sponsor, my first sponsor, and he says to me, I'm not even going to do that because it'd take too long. I'm just going to do one other thing, and then I'm going to talk. We'll see how that. So I'm 10 years sober, 11 years sober, 12 years sober, and I tell my sponsor that I'm getting a divorce. And then I proceed to tell him everything my wife did. Everything in detail. And I want to tell you something. I'm an attorney. I would have sold this thing to the jury. Now, I could have come in here, I said, and then she said this, and then she did that, and then she did this, and then she did that. And I'm going to tell you something. It was definitely divorceable material. I said, I didn't sign up for this shit. I didn't sign up for this crap, you know what I mean? I didn't stay sober for 11 years to be treated like this, have this happen to me, you know? And my sponsor looked at me and he said, I'm 10 years sober, I'm doing the steps like the son of a bitch. I know all about it. I'm teaching the steps, you know, I'm sponsoring everybody. And he looks at me and he says, so why are you upset? And I say, I look at him and I said, I don't understand what he means. He says, why are you upset? I said, what do you mean, why am I upset? You know, because, you know the old saying, well, if it happened to you, you'd be upset too. Because I believe every time I reacted, no matter how I reacted, you know, everybody who got, you know, if it happened, there's no only one way to react to stuff like that. You got to burn down the forest or whatever. And, you know, he said, no, why are you upset? He says, I don't understand, Joe. I just told you, I just told you in detail what she did. And he said, well, that's not why you're upset. I said, what are you talking about? I just told you in detail everything she did. This thing, he says, that's not why you're upset. I said, he says, Russ, that's not why you're upset. I said, but he says, that's not why you're upset. I said, me. He says, Russ, that is not why you're upset. And I just sat there staring at him. He didn't say anything else. And I said, you know why I'm upset? He says, oh, absolutely. Oh, I know why you're upset. I said, you know why I'm upset? He says, oh, shit, it's easy. Well, you're going to tell me why I'm upset? He says, I don't know. Do you really want to know? I said, of course I want to know. Like, what do you mean? I want to know, why am I upset? And then he says this in exactly this way. He says, listen, stupid. You're upset because you're upsettable. So what's this, like Zen AA or something? What the? I get these guys that call me up every day. I get calls from all over the country, people that have a problem. They say, can I talk to you about something? I say, yeah. And after they talk to me for about 5 times, I said, listen, I can tell you're upset, aren't you? You seem to be upset. He says, yeah, I'm upset. I said, yeah, I bet you've been thinking about this a lot. You're damn right I've been thinking about it a lot. I said, so how do you live a life where you're connecting with God? You're doing the Al Kennedy thing. How do you live a life where things that are going to happen that are happening around you in this crazy world where they don't upset you? How can you clear yourself when you're so insane, you're so delusional? So I said to myself one day, before I got sober, I said, if I could only marry that gal, I'd be okay. If I could only have that gal, I'd be okay. And I did the full court press to marry that gal. To marry the gal. And I got married to her. And we had a baby. And we lived on a big house in Miami Beach on LaGorce Golf Course, Country Club. And I became a division chief of the state's attorney's office trying murder cases. And I was 150 pounds lighter than I am now. And I'd wear a blue suit, pinstripe suit with a white shirt and a red tie, and my name was in the papers, trying murder cases, double homicides, driving a big Cadillac, or whatever it is I was, and married to this gal whose father was a doctor, mother was a lawyer, a big deal on Miami Beach, and members of Westview Country Club, and the whole bit. And just about every night I'd be over at the Alibi Lounge, looking at the gals dancing on the floor. Man, if I only had that redhead. If I only had that blind. I never cheated on my wife. I was very proud of myself for that. Never physically cheated on my wife. I would just sit in the bar until 11, 12 o'clock at night when my wife was at home with the baby, thinking about what it would be like if I could go out with those girls. But I couldn't do it because I was married. So I'm thinking maybe I got married too young. We're only kids. You know what I'm talking about? I wasn't happy anymore. Because if you're an alcoholic and you think a woman will make you happy, they'll never. I got news for you. You think a new car will make you happy? Listen, if women made me happy and new cars made me happy, I wouldn't even be in this place. You understand what I'm saying? It's got a half-life of like a week, and that's it. A month, 6 months. What do you mean till death do us part? My wife asked me, I got married, and my second wife, she says, will we be together in heaven? I said, honey, it's till death do us part. Don't be looking for me. I'm a lawyer. I read the fine print, So, So here's the deal. And then we go to a marriage counselor, and the marriage counselor is saying, and I got a date that night with the redhead. The marriage counselor says to my wife, he says, well, what are the 3 things you want to change about Russell? I don't even know what he was saying. She probably mentioned drinking, you know what I mean? And I'm thinking to myself, man, if I don't get out of this thing, I can't go on my date, you know what I mean? And I'm about out of this deal. And he turns to me and says, what do you think about, how do you want your wife to change? He says, I just want to date other women. And that was the end of that. And I did that cold stone sober in front of my wife. I just want to date other women, sabotage the whole thing. You understand? To my wife, that's what I did to her. You know why? Because I don't need alcohol to be an asshole. I don't need alcohol to be a selfish son of a bitch. You understand? I don't blame anything on alcohol. Most people I heard in my life, before or after AA, I did a cold stone sober because I am selfish and I wanted what I wanted. And I walked away from that marriage and I said, I'm free. And if you asked me why I was divorced, I'd say we got married too young. We were just kids. We didn't really get along together. She was trying to change me. I was a happy-go-lucky guy. I loved to go to bars. She didn't want me to do that. She was trying to change me. And I believed all that bullshit. I believed it. Story 1. I took my 4-step. Had her on the list. Took my 4-step. And somebody asked me why I was divorced. Why I got divorced? I said, I'll tell you why I was divorced. I got divorced because I married a lovely gal who was a sweetheart and was a trusting, loving wife. And I was a selfish asshole. And I didn't give a shit about anybody except myself. This thing, selfishness, self-centeredness, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking. We stuff. We other people hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we've made decisions based upon selfishness, put us in a position to be hurt. I did because I'm selfish, and I don't give a shit about anybody except myself. And what happened was, I could not, with integrity, love my wife. I could not, with integrity, say, I'm married to this woman, through thick or through thin, whatever it is, I'm going to be with her forever because I'm a man of integrity, and I'm going to do that because I was a selfish, self-centered person. And so what I did is I pushed her and I pushed her and I pushed her because what I wanted was to be a playboy and go out. And so I left my wife and my son and my child and I sacrificed them and I didn't give a crap because all I cared about was myself. As a result of that, I hurt many, many people. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my wife, my former wife, my child, and I put scars on them that will never go away. And it was only because I was a selfish pig. I was a bum. And that's how bums treat people. That's story 2. Now, who do you want to hang out with? The guy who's telling story 1 or the guy who's telling story 2? Who do you want as your friend? The guy who's telling story 1 or the guy who's telling story 2? You see, I used to be story 1. I didn't do really good at story 1. I drank myself almost to death at story 1. Now I'm story 2. I believe, I don't know, let me this. I used to actually teach people how to do the 4 steps. I'd get up there, I'd have the books. I'd say, here's the chart. Here's the names, divided in 3. You put that. I resent my Dr. Brown, Mr. Brown. This is the reason why. This is what it affects. Then disregarding what they say, where was I wrong? And then list of sex, list of thing, I used to actually map it out for you. You know, the truth of the matter is, unless you're a total idiot, it's in the book. You can ask your sponsor. You don't have to get Hazelden or anything. Somebody wants to do the step forth with me, I say, we're going to do it the way it's in the book. We're not going to do it fancy or anything like that. We're going to do it just like there's 4 lists in the book. There's a chart that shows you how, and then there's another list, and there's 4 lists, and that's what, we're going to do the book. You know what I mean? It's, that's the deal, the 4 steps. But the point is, so I don't teach how to do the 4 step, because if you're a Leo, you're going to figure out how to do it. And if you're not a Leo, you're not going to do it. They're going to do it half-assed. You know what I mean? And I can't turn you into a Leo. I don't have power to turn people into a Leo. I don't even have power to turn me into a Leo. Leo didn't even have power to turn himself into a Leo. You know? That's the deal. But I'll tell you what I can do. What I can do through my story is I can tell you the difference in my life now between living a life with the first story and living a life with the second story. There's a big difference the way I treat people when I lived the life of the first story, where it was all about me, and I blamed everything on others, and I thought I was great, and living a life of the second story, when it's all about God. And when I can see where I'm wrong, and when I can make amends, and I can try to be a righteous and a decent human being to other people, treat everybody like they have a broken heart, because they probably do. So I believe that if you let an alcoholic see, just like I saw with Al Kennedy, where they could go, and what's the difference? Because people are saying, you know what I used to say, why do I have to do this step? How does this work? I don't understand. Why do I have to do it? Why do I have to do the third step? Why do I have to do, I think if there's one thing that's true about alcoholics, when they see something they want, they go for it. Man, I'll tell you, I was a lounge lizard. I went out every night looking for her. I wanted what she had. I was willing to go any length to get it. Let me tell you something. I think alcoholics who see either in a person, like you say, you want what we have, or somehow see a vision of where they could be versus where they are, they're going to do whatever they got to do to get there. And they're going to figure out how to do the 4th step and how to do the 5th step and what sponsors to get and things like that. So I don't really talk so much about this is how you do it. This is what you write down. You do that with your sponsor, the big book. Big book tells you exactly how to do it. What I deal with is maybe something you might call motivation as to why you want to do that. If you want to grow up, become the lady you're supposed to be instead of the girl, and become the man you're supposed to be instead of the child, instead of the little boy. So thank you very much.